Video. This is the second of 3 videos on price discrimination. The first video will define what price discrimination is. In this video here, what we're going to look at today are the conditions that are required for price discrimination to exist. So, if you want to pause the video for a moment and take a note and think about what conditions do you think are required for price discrimination to exist. So the first one we're going to look at is the firm must have some degree of market power. So they must have a significant portion of market share or a large portion of the market to be able to do price discrimination. In other words, they have to have a downward-facing demand curve. So the firm must have in their diagram a downward-facing demand curve for this to exist. This, so basically, in other words, is possible to happen in every market structure that we looked at, except for perfect competition. Because we know perfect competition, the firm is a price taker and therefore has a perfectly flat or horizontal demand curve, whereas in monopolistic, oligopoly and monopoly, the firm has downward sloping demand curves. The reason for this is because therefore the firm has some control over the price. The second condition we have is the separation of consumers into groups to avoid the possibility of resale. So let's break that into 2 parts, to a separation of consumers into different groups. So basically where the firm decides to categorize the consumers into different characteristics. So you could look at it by geography, age, gender, time and income. They're just some of the examples, some of the characteristics a firm must use. By doing this, the firm must ensure that it's not possible for a consumer to buy the product at a lower price and therefore resell it at a higher price. Now, generally speaking, that isn't possible because of the nature of the products being sold. So, for example, let's look at, say, your entry to the cinema. Okay, if you buy a child ticket, for example, and you're clearly an adult, then you're not going to be able to resell the child ticket to an adult. So, what I want you to do for a moment is to pause the video and under each of those categories, so geography, age, gender, time and income, think of an example of a firm that this price discriminates based on that category. Okay, so now we're going to look at some of the examples and let's see if you are right. Okay, so for example, in geography, airline can often charge consumers different prices depending on the country they book from. So for example, Aer Lingus, an Irish-based airline, operates transatlantic flights over to the United States of America. They would often charge a higher price for the Irish consumer and a lower price for American consumers. The reason for that being is that Irish consumers are more likely to pick Aer Lingus because they're more familiar with it than American customers who are more likely to pick an American airline such as Delta or US Airlines. Age is another category. For example, cinemas and museums often charge different prices for children's or old age pensioners in compared to adults for entrance into the cinema or into the museum. For gender, insurance companies can sometimes charge different prices based on their gender. And last but not least, time. So we'll look at 2 examples here. Phone companies can charge different prices or rates at the evenings or weekends. So for example, they can often charge, say, for cheaper rates in the evenings towards daytime calls. Or another example of that, it would be airlines again. They can charge different prices for the same flight at different times of the day. So for example, if I'm getting a flight from, say, New York to Los Angeles, the red-eye early morning flight will be more expensive than, say, for example, a lunchtime departure, for example. So, we're now on to our third condition required, and that's the different price elasticities of demand. So, in order for price discrimination to exist, the consumers have to have different PEDs for the good. Consumers with a relatively low PED for the good would be willing to pay a higher price than consumers with a relatively high PED of the good. Don't worry about that one too much, for that'll be explained further in the third video if you're not 100% sure of the third one. So so in that video now we've explained the conditions that have to exist for price discrimination to occur. If you like this video, why not give it a like? If you want to see more content like this, subscribe to the channel. If you have any questions on this video, just drop a question in the comments, or if you want me to do a video on anything particular, just ask away in the comments as well. Thanks very much for watching.